Hello, peace be with you. The notion that I want to tackle today is the notion of patience. It's a very complex notion and has many different definitions in many different fields. We speak about patience in all the spiritual fields when it comes to spiritualities, to religions, to psychology, and it has different dimensions and different definitions. If we come to the definition that we find, first what we have is to be patient is to get the courage to resist. It could also mean to persevere, to stick to what we are doing. And we also have a notion of resignation. That could be also a negative aspect of patience. Resignation is when you cannot avoid something, so you just accept it the way it is. So the negative aspect of this is as if we are passive and we don't get what is happening, while at the same time there is something which is beyond resignation, which has to do with to accept. And we will see the difference between accepting something and this kind of resignation. While it's true that there is something that we have to experience, which is accepting, and to experience this kind of resignation when something is happening in our life. We all know that patience is a virtue, so there is the very notion of patience is a positive one. It has to do with healing, it has to do with our way of looking at the world, the way we deal with people around us. And what I want to do in this podcast is just to try to categorize the different dimensions, at least two different dimensions of patience. There is one first dimension, which is the way we are passive when it comes to patience. This is when we are facing something that we have to deal with something that we haven't decided, anything that is happening in our life. So this patience is always has to do with acting or behaving or being active in our life. So here, this dimension is to be reactive. If something is happening to me, how am I going to react? So this is the first dimension. And the second one is patience when we are active. So let us start with the first one. So when, tests are coming to us, when we are facing anything which has to do with a test of life, which is not positive for us or not always positive, the very question that we have here is, how am I going to react to this? And the notion of patience is to assess your faithfulness to your principles, your consistency with what you were proclaiming, what you were defending before. So am I going to be faithful to my principles? Am I going to be consistent with what I stand for in my life? So here, this patience is, okay, I'm facing death, I'm facing suffering, I'm facing all these tests in my life. How am I going to react to this? Patience is positive, but patience is not going to transform the negative into something which is positive per se. The negative in our life, the ordeal, the test, whatever, could be negative. What patience is going to help us to do is to put meanings into what is happening. So what is perceived as negative, with patience, with this spiritual understanding, with the way we look at the world, is transforming the negative by giving it a meaning in our life, to try to find a place, to try to integrate this into our life, into our way of life, but also in our daily life, in our understanding of life means to us. So it means here it's to transform the negative, or what is perceived as negative, a test, a suffering, a death, whatever, into something that has a meaning for us. So patience is the way you welcome what you haven't decided and to transform it through the meaning you give to it, from your spiritual experience, from your understanding of life, it's the way you are going to transform this into something which has a meaning for yourself. So giving meaning to something that is happening is to go beyond this passive resignation to something which is a positive, active acceptance of what is happening. Now, there is a second aspect to our patience, and this is the patience that we have into action. So, when we are acting, when we are active in our life, we need to get this quality, which is patience. And how does it work? First, when we are active, we determine some objectives that we want to reach in our action. Patience means that we acknowledge, we know that there are rules, that there are steps, and that we have to accept and respect the steps that we have to go through to get this objective or to finalize our objective. And this has to be done with humility. We need to understand the natural order. You need to go to deal with time. You need to go to deal with space. You need to deal with what is known in our tradition and Sunnatullah. So the way God has created things, that you have to deal with this with humility and to understand how it works. So it's the opposite of rushing, of precipitating things. It's just to look at things and with wisdom and patience, just to look at the world and say, okay, if I want to get there, I have to go through these steps and I have to respect that. We know this at different levels. When it comes, for example, to knowledge, acquiring knowledge, getting knowledge, we know that it takes years just to get knowledge. And not only it takes years, but there are things that you cannot get at a very specific period of time. So if you are too young, you are not going to get some of the truths that, and some of the understanding and some of the logic that you have into in some fields of knowledge. So it takes years. So knowledge, the reforming the self, this takes dozens of years, and you have to understand that there are steps here. Some of us are reading books and they want to change everything overnight. It's not going to work like that. And this is why what we have in our tradition as Muslims is that what God prefers is what you do, the small things that you are changing in your life step by step, and you stick to them. You are not trying to or dreaming of changing yourself in one night and starting again where you were before, or even losing everything. This is counterproductive. So here, the reform of the self takes years and more. Education, our own education and the education of our kids, exactly the same. We have to be humble enough to say, okay, it will take time. Let us go step by step and accept that some of the things that are not understood today are going to be understood tomorrow. And it's not up to us. It has to do with time, and it has to do with sometimes God's will in the way things have to move. Social reform, this takes dozens of years, and we also have to get this in our understanding. We are not going to change the society by going outside and just asking the people to reform themselves, and then this is going to change the society. Humility here means just, okay, I do my part, I do what I can, and then before that, beyond that, I will have to deal with time and space. Cultural transformation, when you want people, we have this in the Quran, but we have it in the Bible, we have it in the Gospels, we have it everywhere, even in the Buddhist tradition. If you read the books, it's just, okay, it takes time just to change the cultural customs and traditions. If you want to change, not everything is good in our traditions and cultures, and it takes time to change. So this means patience in action, just to get a sense of the natural order, to get a sense of human order, societies, and we can't go without taking this into account in our way of dealing with the world. And we understand here that this patience in action has two qualities and two features, so to speak. The first one is our knowledge of the world, our knowledge of how things work in our world, and then also, as I said, the humility. Do what you can, and beyond this, that know that it's not up to you. It's beyond your own involvement. Having said that, what is also interesting here is that sometimes while we are nurtured and we have this awareness that things are happening according to a specific time frame, a natural order, still we need to be aware that sometimes things are happening in a very surprising way, that it's, you know, we just are facing the unexpected. And this is a teaching in our life. It's just to deal with the expected, knowing that the unexpected could happen whenever God wants it to happen, or whatever could happen in our society. So things could happen in an unexpected way. So to be ready to the unexpected is part of our patience as well. It's part of our way we deal with our own patience, is we deal with our own humility. For example, when it comes to a conversion, we know that our heart could change overnight. We don't know what it could be an idea, it could be an inspiration, it could be an intuition, it could be just an intimate revelation, and something could happen. So while people take years just to get knowledge and to change the mind and to see the heart changing, sometimes it takes hours, sometimes it takes minutes, instant change. So we also have to deal with this. So the natural order could find within itself something which is an overpower, something that is going to change everything in a second, and we have to be ready for that. A conversion is one example, but our own suffering could change everything. The way we suffer when it comes to death, when it comes to separation, whatever. Something negative could change everything in our heart, everything in us, and we need to be ready for that as well. So just to not avoid or not prevent ourselves from thinking that this could happen in our life. Even a birth, positive things are changing us in a way where we were not expecting this to happen. And we know this even in the field of knowledge. So we know that some, scientists got an intuition and everything changed. We know the Newton, what happened to him is just an idea that came to him. We know, for example, in quantum physics, for example, at the beginning of the 20th century, all these physicians and scientists were very young, 25, 24 years old, and then they were coming with very creative thoughts, changing everything in our understanding of the world and the very small particles. And this is also something which is quite interesting. And as we have it in science, we have it in arts, that we have artists coming with an intuition, coming with a creative idea. And this also is changing everything. So our humility when we deal with time and space, and accepting that we as active agent in the world, we need to go step by step. We also have the humility to understand and to get it from within that there is a power, there are things that could happen beyond these steps, beyond the space and time, and that can change everything in our life. This is something which is very important in our way of dealing with life, in our way of dealing with our own patience. So it's a double humility, so to speak. The first one is while I'm active in the world, while I'm trying to change things myself, on getting knowledge, getting education, or educating my kids, or changing my society, I need to go through steps. I need to get it right and not to rush and to just deal with patience and wisdom. And at the same time, I need to get the same humility and saying, okay, but sometimes through intuition, through creative thoughts, through something that is happening in the world coming from God, or because there is something which is beyond my understanding. So something could change and go beyond my own patience and change in few seconds. Change in a few seconds what I will take years to change in my life. Because this is the very essence of our understanding of our action in the world. So this double humility is essential. And this is where we need to remember God. And we find this once again in the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim tradition, Islamic tradition, but also beyond this in the Buddhist, the Hindu tradition, that there is something which is beyond us, a power which is beyond our power. So while we need to deal with our own power with patience, we need to have this hope that with this power, everything is possible. Everything could happen without us knowing it or expecting it in the way it's going to happen. And we find in the Quran this very, very important verse where it is said, "Wasbir wa ma sabruka illa billah." Be patient and make you patient, transform you patient through this connection to God. Wa ma sabruka illa billah. Be your patient. Make your patience connected to God's will, or transform this patience into something which is connected to your belief, to your relying onto God in everything that you are doing. So when it comes to ordeals and tests, understand that these have a meaning in your life. So to go from resignation to acceptance and wisdom with patience. And at the same time, when you are facing, suffering or enemies or tests, just rely on God and understand that if He wants to change this, if this is going to be a kind of healing in your life, He can what you cannot. He has the power when you don't have any power. He can transform when you have to just bear with it and face it the way it is. So it's the very meaning of what we have in our tradition, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is power and strength only through and with God. That's also its very understanding of patience in our life, patience in our way of reacting and our way of acting. That our patience is within the natural order, but also relying on God beyond the natural order, meaning everything is always possible. Don't forget to tell the people you love that you love them. Life is fragile.